This will work. Oh, okay. Oh, feedback.
Looks like we're recording.
It says recording.
Okay, cool. All right, great. Well, given that, I'll just do a quick intro like I normally do and say afternoon to everybody. This is the first entirely online. Oh, I'll wait for the feedback to go away. Hopefully that'll stop. Okay, this is an entirely online show and tell. We're going to do it as normal. Show and tell is run since the dawn of time. There is no reason why we need to stop it just because of a little old coronavirus. So we're going to just like pretend we're all doing this remotely per usual. And I've got Reed who's going to give a presentation. Reed, you've got 10 minutes. So I'll let you know when you've got just 2 minutes left. And you can wrap up or take as much time as you need in the afterglow because we'll probably have room for questions today. And I think Dane, am I correct? You will not present during this time.
I'm gonna present.
You'll do it in second.
But I'll do it second. Yeah.
Okay, great, cool. And then Dane will follow up, and we will take it from there. So I'm going to cede the floor to you, Reed. Whenever you're ready to go, I'll put 10 minutes on the clock.
Okay. Well, thanks for everybody coming. What I wanted to talk about today is how to use the manual settings on your camera. I know a lot of people have pretty nice cameras, Canons, Nikons, whatever's, and anything you've bought in the last, I don't know, 8-10 years has got a whole lot of power. And what I've seen is some of my friends have these very nice cameras and they leave them on the auto setting all the time. And the cameras have this wonderful firmware in there that will give you a pretty decent picture under all kinds of circumstances using auto. So, you know, why not, you might say? Well, the answer is that you can get a lot more control over what your picture looks like and effects you can get if you go to manual. And you do need to practice with these settings. You can't just expect to get it right the first time. So if your first 100 pictures come out kind of weird, too much light, too little light, and so forth, don't be hard on yourself. Just delete them and don't worry about it because you will get it down. I'm going to talk about 3 settings on the camera that are worth learning about. And the first is what's called ISO. ISO is that ISO setting, and that is the sensitivity of the camera sensor to light. Everything, well, an awful lot about photography is about the control of light. And ISO has to do with how sensitive your camera is to light. So if you're in a very bright situation, nice sunny day, snow, beach, whatever, you can have that ISO down at the low end of the range, which is typically somewhere between a range of say 100 to maybe 6,400 or 12,800, something like that. And if you're in a dark situation, you can turn the ISO up and the camera will be more sensitive to light, enabling you to take a picture when you would not otherwise be able to do that. However, with this and the other 2 settings I'm going to talk about, there are trade-offs, and that's what you have to practice. It is true that you would be able to get a picture under dark circumstances if you turn that ISO way up. But once you start to get above about 800, maybe 400, depending, you will get noise in the picture, which shows up as that graininess or that speckle kind of quality, which isn't great for the quality of the picture. Now, if it's really, really important to get the picture for documentation reasons, it's, you know, people you haven't seen for 20 years and might not see for another 20, you're not going to care. But you're always trading off the different effects of these 3 settings and how they affect one another. And ISO, you can run the ISO up a fair amount and the graininess won't be too bad, especially if you don't blow the picture up very big. If it stays small, the graininess doesn't show as much. But if you blow the picture up, if you're going to print it, you have to take that into account. The second factor that you want to pay attention to is the shutter speed. The shutter speed is how fast does the camera open and close. Obviously, if it opened for a longer period of time, it's going to let more light in, again, enabling you to take a picture under low light circumstances. But if you are in very bright circumstances, well, you might want to raise that speed up so it goes click instead of click, and lets less light in, getting rid of the possibility of a blowing out of the picture. But again, there are trade-offs. If what you are taking a picture of is moving, you need to be going at a certain shutter speed, which is going to depend on how fast it is that's moving and what effect you want to get. And so if the circumstances are such that the light is low, but the people that you're trying to photograph are moving, assuming it's people or whatever it is that's moving, maybe it's at a race or something like that, race cars, racing people, and you want to freeze the action, you've got to have that speed way up into the range. Now, typically, you can hand hold a camera down to about a 60th of a second, and you won't get blur in something, in a person that's not moving, or anything else that's not moving. But even if you're taking a picture of a building, if you go much below a 60th, even if you try to hold the camera really steady, your heart is beating. And if you just hold your hands out and try to hold them completely steady without moving them even a fraction, it's harder to do than you think. And a little bit of movement can give a little bit of blur, and you don't want that if you want a razor sharp picture. So you're playing off the need to freeze the action if that's what you want, because sometimes you do want that blur effect, and letting enough light in, and then keeping the ISO in mind. It's another factor to take into account while you're taking the picture. So the shutter speed, generally speaking, you want to shoot it, assuming you want to freeze the action or not, at least not have blur. You want to shoot it as fast as you can, given your lighting conditions. Because, I mean, at a certain point, unless something is really moving fast, you're going to freeze it no matter what. And these cameras can go up to, say, an 8,000th of a second. And at that kind of speed, you will stop the fan blades of an electric fan moving. Or a helicopter, you would freeze the blades at that kind of speed. But to use 8,000th of a second, you need a ton of light to do that, which you sometimes do have. If it's a beach or a snow covered ground or a very bright lit place, you might be able to do that. The third factor that you're taking account is the aperture, or f-stop. And you'll see that recorded as f/4 or f/5.6. Something like that. And I've left this one for last because it's a little bit more complicated, because obviously if you open the lens more, it is going to let more light in. So with the other two factors playing into it, you have that to take into account. And if you do what's called stopping it down, that is making the f-stop, making the aperture smaller, why, you're going to let a lot less light in. But there's another thing that happens with wide or narrow apertures. If your aperture is wider, you're going to decrease your depth of field. That's the area of your image that's in focus. So picture a person standing in a field with flowers in front of them and maybe a house behind them. And you focus on the person with the camera wide open. Let's just say the circumstances are such that you've got it pretty wide open. You take a picture of the person, you're going to probably find that the flowers and the house are blurred. And sometimes that's a really cool effect. You really, isolate a person in a crowd or something like that. But sometimes, say with a landscape, you want the whole thing to be in focus. So you want to stop that down, run the f-stop up to f8, f11, f16, or something like that. But of course, that cuts down the light. So you've got to balance that out. Now you can come to appreciate the amazing qualities of the auto setting, because it figures all this stuff out and it comes up with something that's reasonable. Most of the time.
Reed, you've got 2 minutes.
Okay. So with all those things, you essentially should practice. Basically, it's just trial and error and practice. Since it's free, you don't have to worry about the film. You can go run off 50, 100 pictures and see what effect it has, and say, gee, if I put the ISO at 100, and you generally want the ISO as low as you can get. The other thing I want to mention is the settings. ISO, low ISO, less sensitive. High ISO, more sensitive. High shutter speed, less light coming in. But the f-stop, the numbers work counterintuitively. High f-stop numbers are a small aperture. So f22, which is usually the top end of the range in most cameras, some go higher, is the smallest you can get, and f, whatever you have, 2.8 or 3.5 is the widest you can get. The last thing I'll say is, with depth of field, at any given aperture, the farther away your subject is, the bigger your depth of field will be. Somebody close at a wide aperture you're only going to get them in focus, not anything in front and back. Somebody farther away, you have a wider depth of field. And I think that wraps up about 10 minutes. And
yeah, that is about 10 minutes. That's perfectly.
Okay. So I'd be glad to take whatever questions I can answer in the 5 minutes that you allot.
I will take questions with these 5 minutes, and we can take them in the chat, or if you want to hop into the room, you can use your microphone. I just found out you can hold spacebar to do a temporarily unmuted microphone situation, so that's kind of cool.
Okay.
So
should I mute at this point?
It doesn't matter. You're going to respond quickly anyway. So we'll take questions if someone's got a question, or you can put a question into chat and I'll relay it.
This is Lydia. I don't have a camera apart from my iPhone, but I was still able to mostly follow what you were saying. That was very clear. So I just want to say very, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you. I should probably sign up for Indie Skills with this, because you're reminding me.
Yeah, maybe probably a lot of people could use help on that.
I'd be glad to.
All right, I have a question.
Yes.
My question is, as an amateur photographer, is there a way that you would recommend for me to try using some of these techniques or learn some of these things without having to spend oodles and oodles of money?
You can rent cameras and lenses. I can't think of a local place off the top of my head. You might try the only camera store in the city, which is called, well, it used to be, there's another one now, but Webcam at 241 North 12th is a great store, and they might rent cameras. If they don't, there's a new one that just opened up on 2nd right next to the liquor store, and they may rent them. But there are other places online you can rent amazing cameras. Do get the insurance, because if you drop it, these are expensive items. And you can also buy used camera equipment and lenses. And I mean, if you buy from a reputable place, they have a guarantee of it, usually 90 days or something. B&H will sell you used equipment, and it's you can save a ton of money and get some pretty nice stuff. Those would be 2 approaches.
We have messages in the chat. Kathy says, Reed, definitely sign up for Indie Skills. That sounds like an amazing idea. We could probably go into even greater depth with another web chat like this.
Sure.
And Hannah says, there's a guy in West Philly that works out of the Cedar Works studio space, and he rents lenses, maybe bodies too. He thinks his name is Conrad. And there's a link in there. And Dane mentions that Rec Philly members get access to their equipment library at a reduced cost, which is cool. Obviously, bearing the environment right now, check in on the availability of these things. Drew says Resolution Rentals in North Philly. And Jacques says, Reed, do you have any suggestions on how to improve the good old camera on our respective phones? How can you improve the camera on your smartphone?
I am woefully ignorant as to doing that, Jacques. I wish I knew more about, other than pointing the phone at somebody and taking a picture. That's about all I do with my phone.
That's fair. Anybody have any other questions for Reed about some of the things that he covered today? So my thing is, I have tons of questions, and I would just want to know where I can go to learn more? Like, is there an online resource for
There are lots of
photography?
them. There's tons of them. There is more on YouTube than you can absorb. And I can go through the people I subscribe to, and depending on what you want to know, there's there's a guy named Ed Verosky, Verosky, who has some really good free online courses on YouTube. He has some free ebooks on things like flash photography. I've learned a lot from him. And if you want to pay a little bit, and they're not expensive, he does have actual, longer training courses. But you can learn an awful lot from him and others on YouTube for free. Amazing.
That's super helpful.
Yeah.
I think Alex was going to pop in with something. Alex, did you have something?
Yeah, I know Dane mentioned the library of equipment at Rec Philly. This is obviously when we come out of this on the other side, but I've been talking to Rec Philly about ways that Indy Hall and Rec can collaborate more. And one of the considerations is that Indy Hall members and Rec Philly members get access to some of each other's resources, as well as collaborating as people as well. So there's a potential in the future that we may be able to extend that equipment discount to Indy Hall members as well.
Cool.
That's fantastic. In the chat, Chris Berkeley adds, he's still trying to figure out his home microphone setup, but he does know there are third-party camera phone apps that can add functionality to your smartphone camera. Chris, if you have links to any of those apps, that would be really cool, actually. And as Zorn mentions, he doesn't have a question, but he really enjoyed the talk, Reed. And it reminded him of a black and white chemical film class. Remember that?
Yeah.
Remember film?
There's
That's
still
awesome.
there are people out there kind of using film a lot, especially black and white, and they're doing amazing work. But I mean, you do have to deal with all the things that we had to deal with back then.
I remember there's an episode of Stranger Things, not I think maybe in the most recent season, where someone is making film. They're developing film in a dark room. And people online wanted to know what was with the spooky red glow in that room. Was it a haunted room? And it was just a dark room. Like, yeah, teenagers don't know what that is.
Right. That's pretty funny.
That is. All right, Reed, thanks a lot. Thanks for kicking us off. I really appreciate it.
Very welcome. Glad
yeah,
to
yeah, we can do like snaps or something, whatever makes the most sense. I appreciate
Thank
that a
you.
lot.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to mute now.
All right, sounds good. And just to add here, Mira says there are professional camera lenses that clip over your regular phone camera. Oh, that's interesting. And Hannah has dropped the link from the Udemy course. Oh, that's really cool. So there's photography resources in the chat right now. Great. All right, let's toss it over to Dane. Dane, I know you originally planned to do a little co-host situation with Mike, your co-author of the book that you'll be talking about. Mike's not feeling super well right now, so send some love to him on Slack, but we will throw it over to you. I'll give you 10 minutes, and I'll give you a 2-minute heads up when you're getting close to the end.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, definitely send some good healing vibes over to Mike. I know he was really looking forward to this. So hopefully he feels better and it's not the thing we think it is. So Mike and I met around the end of last year, near the end of last year, in the way that Indy Hall members tend to meet. So we were introduced, we started talking a lot about productivity, and we're both kind of systems nerds in that way. And we decided we wanted to work on a project together. So that originally was a way for, he had some clients, I had some clients, and we were both, trying to, the thing that we kept hearing from people was like, oh my God, I wish I had more time. I wish I just had more time. If I had like another 5 hours today, I could get so much more done. If I had another day in the week, I could get so much more done. And we were both sort of aware of the stat that, American tech workers, at least, we tend to only get about 3 hours of work done in a day anyways. Because of various distractions and email and code switching and all this kind of stuff. So we said, okay, well, if we can make a course that can find somebody between 3 and 4 hours of time for themselves, in a week, then it will feel like you have an extra day. And that, that sounds good. That's like something we could all use. So we set out to do a course that was originally called The Eighth Day. And we set it up in a way where you'd use, 2 minutes to find 5 minutes, 5 minutes to find 10 minutes, all this whole thing, graded course. And we hated it. We finished the thing and it was just, we were solving the wrong problem. What we ended up realizing was that if you did have an 8th day in the week, you would spend it the same way you spend the other 7. And so what that taught us was that we needed to not find a way for people to get more time, but to have people really experience the time that they have differently in a healthier way, in a way that was less toxic, less productivity porn oriented, less like, let me squeeze every last drop of productivity out of our time. And that ended up becoming sort of the direction that we took. And we ended up writing this book called, appropriately enough, Just Stop. On the back end of that, I've been going through a lot of sort of like personal philosophical changes. I know that, Mike has gone through some of these as well. And we were sort of looking at the larger sort of consciousness around like what's happening in the world, what's happening in our society, this idea that we can have productivity increase forever without end, and that is how our society is set up, and that will always work. And I think that we're all kind of seeing right now that the second productivity stops, everything falls apart. So there's really a lot for us to kind of unpack there. And so as we were going through and trying to figure out the best way to share this with people, we kind of realized like this isn't the sort of thing that we really wanted to sell. We wanted to have it available for people to read and share the philosophy, share the content, share the exercises. So the book is available to read for free online right now. It's at readjuststop.com. I'll drop that link in the chat. And I just want to sort of like go through the 5 exercises that we settled on for this book. That these are things that you can kind of do at any time to reconnect with time, reconnect with how you're spending your time, and feel a bit more present. What we kind of realized was our previous approach of doing this more of like a 30-day challenge, kind of thing,
Okay.
doesn't really stick, because in the moment is when you need, the reminder to get more present, the reminder to, change that relationship. And so these are the 5 exercises. We'll go through them, what they mean. And then hopefully, if we have some time, maybe run through one of them. Does that sound good? I'm seeing some nods.
Sounds good. Just in case you can hear this, Marty, would you mute your mic? Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. So the 5 exercises that we ended up going through were in order: being, noticing, owning, enjoying, and reclaiming. There's specific meanings that we've attached to these. For being, that is the practice of sitting still and experiencing the passing of time without expectation. This is a really difficult thing for us to do. And I'm a little bit like, this is the one part of it where I'm like, man, I wish we weren't doing this virtually. Because the original plan was to have people sit and do a being exercise with each other. Really, it comes down to sitting still for 5 minutes and not doing anything. When I say that to people, a lot of people jump to like, oh, you mean like a meditation sort of thing? It's like, no, not even meditation. Like, stop trying to do things. Stop trying to fill your time with tasks, and really just experience how long 5 minutes actually is. It's incredibly uncomfortable for a lot of people the first couple of times. So once you sort of realize like, oh shit, like that's how long 5 minutes really is, you realize how much time you actually have when you're not stuck in your head about things. So being, sitting still, experiencing the passing of time without expectation. Noticing is the second exercise that we go through, which is connecting with yourself and your surroundings in the present moment. That is understanding, how do I feel? What are the things that are on my mind? That gets a little bit of the mindfulness. This we usually end up doing as a written exercise, sort of you just get a pen and paper and start listing out the things that are on your mind. That practice is extremely therapeutic. A lot of times when you run into somebody and they say like, oh, I'm so busy. And it's like, well, what are you busy with? And what they do is they just list out this sort of like, this is the to-do list that is in the back of my mind. And when you try and keep it in your head, it feels like it's a forever list. And then you write it down and realize like, oh, there's actually only 10 things on this list. It's not as big as it is in here. So that practice of journaling and sort of brain dumping and getting stuff out helps you notice what's going on, and it gets it out of here and onto the paper so that your brain can get back to what it's good at, which is managing your experience of the present moment. The third exercise that we talk about in the book is owning, which is taking responsibility for how you use your time. Now that I think can come off a little bit judgmental, because we have judgments over how we use our time. If we binge watch, 10 episodes of Grey's Anatomy, we'll be like, oh, I wasted so much of my time watching Grey's Anatomy. But if we own our decisions on how we did that, we can say like, you know what, I've had a difficult week and I needed some time to unpack. And so I chose to watch 10 hours of Grey's Anatomy. That's what I chose to do with my time. And as we own those decisions, it gets easier for us to choose to do different things with our time. That comes a bit later when we start talking about reclaiming, but there's no judgment over how you spend your time so long as you're doing it, consciously. There's a difference between, spending some time on YouTube to unwind and just clicking the next video on YouTube because you're not really paying attention to where your time's going. It's a difference between those two things. So the ownership over how we spend our time is a big component to getting back into the present moment.
Dan, you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, awesome. The fourth exercise that we talk about is enjoying. And this one, it can be extremely difficult, especially in the States. We have a hard time finding subtle pleasures. And in that practice of really being able to feel like, what would feel good for me to do right now? And checking in with our bodies. For some of us, that might be like, hey, I've been sitting all day. I would like to spend some time moving around. That's what would feel good for me to do right now, and giving ourselves permission to move around or go to the store and get, a green drink if that's what we want to do, or eating a donut if that's the thing that we want to do. Whatever that enjoyment is, and feeling into that, again, connects us back into the present moment, because now we're looking at what, instead of I'm worried about what I need to get done tomorrow, what would feel good right now? Well, let me write down this list of things, get it out of my head, and now I'm not worried about that anymore. I'm back to the present moment where I can actually affect change. And feeling into what feels good about the present moment is a huge component of that. And finally, reclaiming is the fifth exercise that we talk about, which is making conscious, deliberate decisions about how you use your time. This is the sort of thing where, I feel like a lot of us have been in the position where we are running late for something, and it's like, oh man, I'm gonna be 5 minutes late, but if I do a power walk, I'll only be 4 minutes late. And it's like, there's no point to that. There's no big difference between being 4 minutes late and 5 minutes late. Take your time, contact the person that you're supposed to be meeting with and say, hey, I'm running 5 minutes late, and reclaim that extra minute to not rush, to just, again, be in the present moment. The sort of culture that we have around productivity and efficiency forces us to like shave minutes off at the expense of, how we actually are experiencing our lives. And that reclaiming, putting something in your calendar, if you're working in a situation where every day, it's a week or something like that, that nobody else can schedule time into. That's reclaiming that time for you to do whatever you need to do. And that's a really important part of it. So much of our economy is really based around the sale of time. And I know like Alex talks about this a lot in his coursework, to move away from selling your time to make a living to something else. But even sort of before we get to that economic level, there's a visceral level of just understanding that time is one of the things one of the only things that we truly have, and one of the only things that we're not going to get any more of. So being conscious about how we spend our time, what we spend our time doing, and how we experience the time that we have is kind of the most important thing that we can do as people. So we get into a lot more detail about these philosophy to sort of open up your perception of these things, and exercises to run through. Some what I call spells, which are just short sentences that you can use to remind yourself of the exercises when you are feeling anxious or feeling overworked or feeling like you don't have enough time, to sort of just like bring you back into the process of reading the book. So everything, like I said, it's available for free online at readjuststop.com. We do offer a downloadable PDF for sort of pay what you want, so that we do get some of that capitalism going. But largely, I really hope that people take the time to read it, and I hope that it is impactful, especially now when a lot of us have more time to ourselves than we've had in our entire adult lives. So yeah, that's the book, and that is my time. So I guess I'll open up to some Q&A.
That's awesome. Thanks, Dane. We're going to open up the Q&A. I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock. If anyone has a question and you want to do it, I'm looking in the gallery view. So if you put your hand up and you have a camera on, then I can call you. Otherwise, just hop in, unmute yourself and hop in. All right, Zorn.
Hi, great talk. Definitely resonated with me. So I definitely agree with a lot of what you said, particularly like the amount of hours that you can realistically expect to put towards a project. And one of the issues I've had is that like it's been very clear to me since I've been back doing consulting for a couple of years that like I can realistically only expect to get about like 25 hours a week like of real programming work towards a client project. And when I try to sell that to them, a lot of them freak out because they want to hear 40 hours. And it's like, I don't know if I should just lie to them and be like, yeah, I'm doing 40 hours, because it's like, I mean, I don't, I only bill 25, but it's definitely something that it's a problem during the sales process, because there's this, I don't know, unfair expectation. I don't know if you had any like feedback or comments on that, or if you, I mean, I don't know.
For that, I mean, and I'm sure Alex would probably have more detailed things to say about this, but that sounds to me that you are at the stage of your consultancy where you should be shifting from hourly quotes to project-based quotes. Because that way you can you start quoting based on the value that you provide for the client rather than the actual hours that your ass is in a chair like doing stuff. And then the question of whether or not you're spending 25 or 40 hours starts to sort of go away. And plus side, you get to charge more. So that seems sort of like where you would be at in your journey right now.
Yeah. Cool, thanks.
Yeah. Drew asked a question in the chat about expounding on subtle pleasures. This is the sort of thing where here's an idea for it. The next time you go to take a meal, don't have your phone out. Don't try and talk to anybody. Don't try and do anything else other than just eating the food and like really paying attention to like how good the food tastes. This is something that's like really stuck in our body, but like, man, food tastes good. That's not, we don't just eat to like fuel our brains so that we can do more work. We eat because it's pleasurable. And these are the sort of subtle pleasures that end up getting lost a lot. One of the things that we talk about in the book is like getting up and dancing for no reason, with no particular object in mind, except to just feel how good it is to like get your body moving around. Pleasure is the reason that we experience pleasure at all as organisms is because pleasure guides us towards things that are good for us. That's how we know they're good for us, because it feels good. That's what that sense is for. But that sense gets dulled a lot because we don't sort of trust our drive for pleasure. We don't trust our desire. We don't trust the things that feel good. We get that, no pain, no gain mentality a lot. So reclaiming that ability to feel pleasure in tiny, tiny bits throughout your day makes it easier to stay present. I hope that is a good enough expansion of that concept. Awesome.
That is really helpful.
I have a question. This is Lydia again. I'm definitely going to read your book online or donate a little bit and get the PDF. In addition to your book, what are some book recommendations you have on this same topic?
Christ. If I were to force all of you to sit down and read a book right now, and I'll drop a link in here, it is The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. It's a book by this gentleman, Charles, I think it's Eisenstein, Charles Eisenstein. Also available for free online, and you can purchase a hard copy of it. But just from a sort of perspective of like sort of what's happening in the world right now, there's this, I think, feeling that we are all seeing that the way we have been doing things, we can't keep doing it that way forever. And the current crisis is really indicative of that to me. And what this book does is put into words a vision of what could come next that I think is human focused, extremely empathetic, non-judgmental, non-preachy, and extremely accessible. So I'm going to drop a link to that in the chat. Y'all got some time, read some books. But this one really, really helped me. Honestly, it helped snap me out of a depression last year. So I don't want to sell it too hard, but it's one of the more important books I've read recently.
Thank you.
Also, what do you call it? Radical Candor, I think, is another good one to pick up. Radical Candor, and what's the Brene Brown book? Daring Greatly, is that it? I'm looking at Alex, but
If you think of it, Dane, if you wouldn't mind, since we've got a little master list of stuff for people to help mitigate everything that's happening right now, if you think of it, I would love to add those to that master list, including your book with Mike. I think that would be amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. The Eisenstein book is wonderful. So I'll post those. I'll post all of those. Where should I post those? In here, or should I post it in Slack? Or
let me pop a link into the chat, and this is one that I've been putting together. You can put it into the chat right now, but I have been asking folks to contribute to this right here, which is the work from home master list. It is all of the things that you can get from Indy Hall and just recommendations people have for helping each other out. So there is that. And that's about 5 minutes for questions. So let's do snaps for Dane. Thanks, man. This is the quietest applause. It's so weird. That's awesome. Please send gratitude to Mike as well for putting in the work to make that book together. That's fantastic. This is usually the time in Show and Tell where we have an open slot. And what I think I would want to do, and hopefully it's not too impromptu, Alex, I wanted to talk a little bit about our plan to get together again later this afternoon here on Zoom again for a town hall of sorts. Maybe there's something that you wanted to add about that, just to invite folks to be a part of it.
Sure. Hey, gang. So I'll share two things. One, and they're very much related. I just, while we were on here, sent out an email that hopefully everybody gets soon. If you don't get it, please let me know. I'm a little concerned. I've heard some reports that some of our messages have not been getting out. I don't think it's this group though. I set up a new website this morning. indyhall.online.
Woo.
Is a easy to remember URL that goes to what is now a Google Doc. And for the foreseeable future, I think we'll keep as a Google Doc, because I think having it being a living resource is kind of the goal. This group, I'm imagining, just from looking at who's in the room, is mostly folks who, are at least active or semi-active in Slack, and y'all are the ones that are paying attention. We've got a lot of folks in our community that are not as used to or comfortable with online digital tools. We want to make that more accessible to them. And as we're thinking about how we can both take the experiences that we're used to having every day and bringing them online, but also thinking about creating new ones that make sense to solve the problems that we have today, this is going to be sort of the front door, so to speak, of all of the stuff that's going on there. So that's live as of literally in the last hour. Go check out indiehall.online, read through it, recommendations, ideas, suggestions, if there's stuff that you think belongs in there, if there's things you think we can make clearer, if there's things you want to contribute, that space is there for it. And we're going to keep using that as sort of the homepage of Indie Hall's new online efforts. And one of those, it's on the upcoming events section, is doing a town hall of sorts this afternoon. Want to get folks together from 3 to 4 today. Less of a talking at. I've written, I don't know how many words I've written in the last week, but it's been a lot of them. And I thought it would be valuable to get together in a room and just spend a little time together checking in. I was on a call yesterday that a couple of my friends are running, and they did a little exercise that called red light, yellow light, green light. And it's nothing revolutionary, but just sort of I think it's helpful for everybody to be able to say roughly where they are and realize that they're not alone in it. And then we can guide that conversation towards, things that we can do to help each other, things that we're figuring out on our own, that we can share with each other. So if anyone here wants to and is able to come to that or even part of that, that's from 3 to 4, same URL, indiehall.org/Zoom. And my hunch is that we'll probably make something along this into a once a week sort of thing, a red light, yellow light, green light group. Since we are all very much in this together, figuring it out in our own ways and collective ways. So I'm going to call this a resounding success in terms of a virtual show and tell. At peak, I think we had 25 people in here, which was really cool. So thank you to everyone who tuned in, to the presenters, to Adam for hosting, of course. And there's some conversation we've had about maybe even making show and tell a weekly thing for the near term, since folks have more time, more questions, and I think some welcome, structured, valuable distractions would be good. So if you want to do a show and tell about literally anything, hit up Adam, and we're going to start building out a weekly show and tell roster as well.
Yes, just to ride on that. DM me, message me on Slack, reach me however you want. Phone lines are open. If you have anything you want to talk about, if there's something you want to teach, if there's something you want to share, if you read a book and you want to summarize it, anything would be really helpful. We can do show and tells where we have a few people in a row. We can do a show and tell casually where it's just one person talking about whatever's on their mind and what they want to share. I think that's great. I think that's really helpful. And now we have the ability to do this without hopefully interrupting too much. And I want folks to keep in mind that we can have 25 people in the room. We can have 2. And either way, someone is getting something out of being present for the conversation. So please don't think of it as like nobody came in for my topic, because I will not feel salty when it's just me and Dane and I'm talking about the virtues of the Man-Thing, the greatest Marvel comic book character of all time. So whatever you have to share, it's saving somebody, even if it's just yourself. So keep that in mind for now. And we will wrap it up here. So I want to say thank you to Reed and Dane for experimenting on this format with us as our pioneers for an online show and tell. We'll upload this video to the Indie Hall YouTube, so I will share that link when it is ready to go. And then we will reconvene, if you would like to, today for a town hall dialogue of sorts about all of the ways that we are helping each other out using Indie Hall Online. And that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Adam and Alex, can I stay on and ask you a question? Everyone's welcome to stay on, but not part of the Indie Hall.
Oh yeah, by all means.
One thing is that I had shot you guys an email about an idea I had, and then the idea of booking time for my own event kind of overwhelmed me. the idea of giving it as a show and tell feels very accessible.
Cool.
So this resonates. If you have a weekly show and tell, and we can just hop in, as opposed to like, oh gosh, I'm putting together a whole event of my own and maybe no one will come. So I like that a lot. And the other thing I wanted to say is, right, the group of us who are on this call seem like, you know, active names, a lot of people I recognize, and there are probably people who are not comfortable with this stuff. So basically there's a divide, and I'm wondering if we can offer up some kind of buddy system, like just raise your hand if you don't know what Slack is, you don't get group buzz, but you want to figure it out. And then you can be assigned someone. So I just have like one person who I'm helping, as opposed to these long lists of resources, which are so great, but are overwhelming as well.
Yeah.
I think that's an awesome idea. And I think a really good compliment. I'm going to add that to my notes right now. One of the things we've talked to a few folks who are more comfortable and familiar with this stuff about doing like a once a week, super easy, small group 101 for, you know, just walking through the basics of Slack and Zoom and things like that. I think having that have a built-in handoff to, if you've got more that you want one-on-one, I think a buddy system complements that so beautifully.
Yeah, and to that end, I've been putting together a little outline of some of the things that I think are most valuable as far as getting non-online folks to start using some of these tools. And when I have that outline and I'm using it to help do one-on-one with folks, I would love to be able to share that with other people. So if you want to do the buddy system, at least you have some infrastructure of like, oh, okay, here's first thing, second thing, third thing. And keeping it as simple, oh, Zorn's in a castle. That's keeping it as simple as that is really important to me, because to everything you just said, Lydia, I don't want this to be more overwhelming than it can be. So even if it's just an introduction to Slack, Slack is a portal to so many other things. Even if it's just an introduction to Zoom, the same. So we can keep it pretty essential as far as it goes.
And I'll also add to that, if anybody specifically wants to be a buddy or to help lead those 101s, reach out to us. I think if we build a roster of the folks who have a little more experience, everybody's going on vacation. This isn't fair.
How do you want to do that?
Then I think having known folks be there will help us get this going as well. That's really great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Other ideas along those lines or out of left field, you know, I said something to Adam and Anaya, I can't remember if it was yesterday or today, all the days blur together. But I said, you know, right now this is an opportunity to experiment. You know, things like show and tell we know how to do. But we can get kind of wacky. There's zero stakes at this point. To Adam's point about, you know, if it's just you and another person, that's not a bad thing. So I think let's use this as an opportunity to really kind of go get creative about what kinds of things we want to do, and then together brainstorm, well, how could we do that online? Or anything we do, if you see a way like, hey, what if we made this tweak? You know, again, we've got basically more bandwidth to experiment than ever before. And I'll say that as a co-working community, Indie Hall is extraordinarily advanced in terms of what we already have in place. Everyone else is figuring out the baseline that we already have right now. So we get to learn new lessons and help them along as well, which I'm pretty excited about. So, you know, this week has been weird and hard, but in a lot of ways also a heartening reminder of how much we already have built that always has existed. And we just sort of get to shift focus and energy into something that has always deserved more attention. And now my hope is that when we come out of this on the other side, all this great stuff continues to exist in addition to being able to walk in the door of our co-working space. So this is going to make Indie Hall better for everybody.
Yeah, agreed. Latency issues aside.
And stay safe and healthy, and everyone, your family and friends do as well. But yeah, this is going to make us better. I feel really strongly about that.
Me too. Thanks, Alex. All right, thanks everybody. I'm going to hop out of here, and we will reconvene later this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
See
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.